You're listening to Krush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Krush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at KrushPerformance.com.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Jeff Krushell, and this is Krush Performance, where each week we talk about all of the things that go into something I call creating coachable players. It's this whole idea of preparing your players for the game they're participating in. And it goes back to kind of that sort of old mindset of the athlete before the player. And I think in today's landscape, where injury rates are so high, burnout, dropout rates are so high, this is a very, very important conversation. The last few weeks, we've been talking baseball, of course, as the Major League Baseball season gets underway and youth baseball also kicks off around the globe. The conversations have been fantastic with Bob File, Hector Barrios, and today I have such a treat for you. We're going to be talking to the Dodgers' first base coach, Chris Woodward, former manager for the Texas Rangers, former player of mine with the Blue Jays, just a great baseball person. And I want to talk to Woody about this whole idea of creating coachable players. But we're going to do it in a Dodger kind of way. We're going to talk about how they go about working and developing their players, their big league players, not just their youth and their young recruits and their minor league players, but their big league players. There's something very, very special going on there. And I am going to throw a couple of questions at Woody that he might be surprised about. Hey, just a little preface. He doesn't know this yet, but I am going to ask him if the Dodgers might very well be the perfect sporting franchise. Last week, I was talking with a good friend of mine who's also a sportscaster here, but also a huge baseball fan. And we were just talking about organizations and franchises, especially as we head into the season. And, we just started talking about all the great franchises and players and what it takes to put together a team now. But for teams to have continued success, regardless of their payrolls, there's special things that need to happen. Back in 2011, I watched the Astros with great interest, with the new ownership coming in, and with their very verbal as they admitted that they were going to attack the World Series. And sure enough, you watch them over the next few years, and there they are, and still to this very day doing something very special. We look at the Orioles more recently going through turmoil and change of ownership and finally putting it all together to have some success. We see these stories year after year and in other sports, but the Dodgers, you think about the Braves as well. Some really interesting things going on. Could the Dodgers be the perfect franchise? We're going to ask Woody this as we get into the conversation, but we're also going to talk about analytics and the role of analytics and how they use it and how in youth sport we might be overemphasizing some of the wrong things. And when it comes to developing players, is there things we should be thinking about? I am very, very confident in saying we do not spend enough time preparing our players for the game. I joke around about this all the time, but if there was ever a position, king of baseball or king of sport, one of the things I would love to see in the game is a period at the start of the season, especially in developmental youth baseball. Think about the pro game, right? You have spring training, 5-6 weeks of spring training to get ready for the season. But then if you go back to youth baseball, how many times as a coach, okay, for the coaches that are out there, for youth baseball, let's say U10, U13, U15, how many times do you get together with your team before they start playing games, right? And is it enough time to actually get them ready for those games? I know it's not, okay? There are some organizations out there now that are doing things well, right? These academies that are now popping up here and there, and some of the elite travel teams are actually going through a progressive development for the season, a spring training, so to speak. And they're actually taking their time to get players ready for the game. We're going to talk about that today, and we're going to ask Woody about this trip to Japan they just went on. What an incredible sporting experience. But I want to talk to Woody about that as well. So without further ado, let's get into it because this is going to be a fantastic conversation. Here it is. My good friend Chris Woodward, first base coach for the Los Angeles Dodgers. All right, everybody. Hey, we're joined by my good friend Chris Woodward, first base coach now for the Dodgers. Woody, hey, thanks for joining me. First question: how's the jet lag coming back from Japan?
Oh yeah, that was definitely a trip, but I think they did a really good job. We got pretty scientific when it came to hey, make sure you're drinking this, make sure you're eating that. We took some supplements, and they told us, hey, sleep at this time, sleep at that time, wake up at this time. I don't think I followed it to a T, but I feel fine. Honestly, I feel fine. Opening days tomorrow for us, and I feel good.
Hey, listen, I actually love these international games for the game of baseball. I just think it's so great, and this was like I don't think there could be a bigger scenario than this with the of course the players on your team and where you guys open the season, in Japan. I mean, I can't imagine a better scenario for the game of baseball. But I do get worried about those big trips and the players making those kind of trips just as the season starts. So.
Yeah, and it was something that we talked about a lot. Obviously, they went to Korea last year. I wasn't on the
Yep.
staff last year, but and there was some issues coming back. Like it took guys a while. So I think this year we were a little bit more prepared. It was a very similar trip. Obviously, they're really close in proximity. So coming back, I think our guys took notice to the advice that our people that were in charge of, like I said, making it a little bit more scientific. They followed the protocol, and I think we're in a good spot. I don't think you'll it's a great thing as far as going that far and coming back. I think you can only do it so many times, and I think we've maximized our last 2 years. I don't think we're going to do it again for the next at least three, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was
Sure.
definitely worth the trip. Obviously, going there with who we had on our roster, with who they had on the roster, it was really magical just to see from a baseball standpoint, just the excitement that was in that country, and obviously the numbers show it was one of the most watched event in I think Japanese history. So it was a really cool thing for baseball. It was a really cool thing for Japan, and obviously those players, man. I can only imagine. You could see Shohei getting kind of choked up during the national anthem, the Japanese national anthem. So that was obviously really cool to see.
Oh, I can't even imagine, Woody. What a scenario. You've been lucky enough to do some international work with the WBC and with other teams and organizations. And I've been around, working with Major League Baseball International now for upwards of 20 years now. And I'm just amazed at how the game, since you and I were together with the Blue Jays, how global the game has gone. And not just the number of players coming from different parts of the world, but the impact players, Woody. So great, I think.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and you inspired me to do that. I know we talked way back in the day, and you were the one that got me going
Yeah.
international stuff. I got to go to New Zealand, got to go to Australia, got to take the family all over the world. It was a really cool experience, and then obviously this with Japan. But I think the game of baseball, it's like once people understand it and they start to really understand what what it means to be a ball player, and you start digging into the culture. Yeah, it's just awesome. It's just awesome growing up, obviously a ball player, and then going to other countries where it wasn't the most popular sport, but it quickly became popular just because the way the kids were playing it, and obviously the parents see the impact that the game has on their kids. So I love it. I mean, I'll do anything I can to spread the game globally, but it's cool to see how popular it has become.
Yeah, for sure. And while again, just looking at the numbers from that season opener in Japan, incredible stuff. Of course, like the talent pool, like the players, the Japanese players you guys had. I mean, look, the two starters, right? I mean, I think it's the first time in baseball history that we've had two international starters like this on a team going back to their home country to perform against a team from their country. Just so epic. Just forget about baseball. This is sports, baby. I love the whole scenario.
No doubt. And Shohei didn't even pitch. That's
Yeah,
what's
right.
crazy. I mean, it was the two other guys that pitched. But like I said, the excitement that those fans had every time those guys stepped on the field, and for those guys to perform the way they did was pretty impressive. I know that's got to be a ton of pressure. I mean, the whole country on your shoulders. And Shohei hits a homer his first game. Just the things that those guys did in that series, and the way they carried themselves, the respect they have, for their country, for the game. They're great ambassadors, and like you said, it's cool to see all these guys from other countries have such an impact on our highest level. And I know we look at the major leagues as like the highest level in the world. And, you got guys from Curacao, you got guys from Australia, you got guys from Japan, all over obviously all the Latin American countries. And they're all coming over. We have a kid from Uganda, in our system, who I've talked to many times over the last 2 years. And it's just fascinating to see how global the game truly has become.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun, Woody, and I really think that there's much, much more to come. It's such a great scene right now. But as the season gets underway here, there's a couple things I wanted to talk to you about. And I'm really glad. I mean, I know this is the craziest time we could ever possibly invite you to come on. So really appreciate it. But I think the conversation couldn't be more timely. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. I definitely want to get to the player development side with you, Woody. But before that, I just want to maybe just throw this across the bow here. In December, Major League Baseball, and I'm kind of proud of this. This is my 20th year with Major League Baseball, and I'm proud of what they're doing here. They released their internal investigation on pitcher injuries in baseball, and it wasn't just focused at the big league guys. They were looking at the game right down to grassroots, and it was more of a they talked to like 300, 400 experts in the area, coaches like yourself, strength guys, orthopedic surgeons, GMs. They talked to the athletic trainers, just people around the game to say, okay, what do we feel is the cause for this injury rates that we're seeing in the game at all levels, by the way. And it was interesting to see, Woody, for a professional organization to take the initiative here, because the findings from this study were shots across the bow to everybody in the game. They talked, of course, about the velocity and the push for velocity in throwing earlier and earlier in development, but also at the big league level. They talked about year-round game management. They talked about the showcase issues and the fact that the showcases and the timing of some of these showcases are terrible. They talked about training and workloads year-round. They talked about weighted ball programs. A lot of things came out of this just to raise awareness. From your perspective, Woody, you've been around the game at every level now. You managed a team now. You're with what might be the best franchise in all of sport. We'll get to that later. But from your perspective, if you were to take a step back and take a 30,000-foot view, do you have any thoughts on that? Like where we're at and where we might need to go here to help maybe curb and keep our players safe?
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time.
Right, I
We
get
could
it.
talk for hours and hours, and these are conversations I've been really curious to hear our pitching people, our sports science people, our trainers, our everybody. I've literally asked this question, when I was in Texas as a manager, like how do we decrease the amount of how do we keep our players from getting injured if we can? It's not possible to have zero injuries, but how
Right.
do we minimize it? How do we protect our guys? How do we, so I know when I was in Texas, we like watched pitch counts, in the beginning of the season, we had a lockout. So we didn't allow anybody to go past a certain amount of pitches to start the year because we just didn't know the impact that it would have after COVID. They weren't able to throw. We didn't know how they were throwing. So all those factors, like, I had to ask a lot of questions. And now we're kind of back to normal. Guys are having full off seasons again. But yet, the injuries are spiking obviously for the last however many years. And it
Yeah.
is a change for velocity. You said that. And I hate to say this out loud, but velocity is king.
Yeah.
And we know that. Like everybody knows that from the top down. So I think the questions that I have for like organizationally, that's where we've had a lot of injuries. Teams have had a lot of injuries in the big leagues, but not as many in the minor leagues. Well, they're protecting their guys in minor leagues, but they can't protect them in the big leagues because you have big league games to win. Everything's at stake. So I don't know what the answer is as far as like in organization. That's team by team. They're going to have their own protocols. But I think from a 30,000-foot view, looking at the youth game, my son is 15, so I've always coached his team. I've
Yeah.
always helped coach his team. And so I look at some of those pitchers, and now he's playing with kids that are high school. He's in high school now, so a lot of his kids on his team, and we had a really good team that we had his travel team in Arizona, and we had one of the top pitchers who threw the hardest. He's throwing on 90 something miles an hour at 14. Like, and I stressed to his parents, be careful. Don't chase velocity at 14. It doesn't matter if he's throwing 100 or if he's throwing 95 at 14 years old. Just because you want to make sure he's the number one prospect or he's the highest ranked this or that, it doesn't matter. Like think about the kid's health. You know what I mean? And that's where I think that these kids, and I got on a parent one day, one of our kids was just close to 80 miles an hour. That's hard for 14. This is like 13 or 14-year-old kids. And that's throwing pretty hard. And he was at 79 and 79. And unfortunately, like, the game we were playing was being recorded and every pitch velo was being posted. So the parent came over, and this guy's dealing for 2 innings. I told him, hey, man, make sure you mix this pitch with this pitch. And we were going front to back. We're going side to side. We're doing all these things. And he was pitching really, really well. He was doing his job in the game. And all of a sudden, in the third inning, his dad yelled, hey, you're at 79, just a little harder. And I literally lost my mind. And I told the parent, go away, go get a hot dog, get out of my face, like, get away from this kid. Like, you're going to ruin him. And sure enough, it was fastball, 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 fastball. And it was ball to the backstop, hit a guy. And all of a sudden, the wheels came off. And I'm like, what do we do? So I had to tell the parent after, what are we doing? Why would you say that to him? Like, why would you, like, get him out of his sequence? Why would you force it? He's trying to throw harder. And he obviously didn't get hurt, but that's how kids get hurt. And I know that, like, all these pitching coaches, all these travel coaches, they make their money on results. Unfortunately, it's not about development. It's just about results, immediate results. If I'm a hitting coach, hey, I'm going to get you to hit the ball 2 miles an hour harder. It's not about being a good hitter. It's not about having a good swing, a good path, staying through the ball. It's not about, having some adjustability. It's about how hard can you hit it. And it's the same for pitching coaches. How hard can you throw? I can add 2 miles an hour to your velo. How about you teach the kid how to command his pitches? How about you teach him how to have balance, like how to have control, how to have, that will increase his velo at the same time. So a lot of the things that are happening, unfortunately, we've created that problem. Yeah. MLB has created it because that's what we value. And unfortunately, we can't unvalue that, because if you don't throw hard, you tend to get ripped. So it's like, we obviously at the top level know that that's king, but at the lower levels, like, we have to do a better job, especially at the youth level, when most of these kids aren't going to play professionally. Most of these kids aren't going to play, in college, but we've got to try to do everything we can to, like, make sure their health is number one, and not pitch them constantly throughout the year. Give them some rest. Hey, go play basketball for 2 months. Yeah. You know what I mean? Do something else. Go play soccer for 2 months. Get your footwork, increase your foot speed. Go do something else, or just take time off. Don't throw for a month or two. You can throw, but, like, just light. Like, there's no reason that these kids should be playing, like, World Series games, basically, when they're playing these tournaments. They're basically Game 7 of a World Series every single time, because they can't lose. Their parents can't lose. Like, the kids feel like they can't lose. So It's like, it's max effort all the time, every time. And it's unfortunate.
No, but it's an important conversation, Woody. We're talking with Chris Woodward, former Major League player, one of my former players. So awesome back in the Blue Jay days, former manager for the Texas Rangers, and now first base coach for the Dodgers. Back with the Dodgers, Woody. I can't wait to talk about this more. But before we move on, this is such an important conversation. If we look at baseball as a whole, it's just such an incredible game, man. At some point, it's you and the baseball. There's no escape. It's not like football where you can maybe rely on your teammates, or if you have brute strength, you might be able to cheat your way through some scenarios. It's not like any other sport. At some point, you have to execute, right? And that's why I love the game. But there's also this cool team component to the game as well, where you got to work as a unit at some point as well. But in this game, the data is showing us that it takes longer to develop a high-level baseball player than a player in any other sport. And a lot of that has to do with the skill thing. The average age of a major league player breaking into the big leagues right now is right around 24 years of age. So, you talk about a 14-year-old. And one of the things I've gotten into when I start talking to parents or groups and organizations at the youth levels, I said, look, this is the average age for a player. How many years do you have? Well, 10 years. Do you know what we could do with an athlete over 10 years if they stay healthy? It's incredible, man. But those are some of the things that people might not think about all the time, right?
Right. No, and I think that's where they look at it as like, okay, my kid needs to be the best now.
Yeah.
No, there's development, and this is where, like, I get really, more frustrated just watching how guys are coached and watching how they're, how they are truly developed. And there is a lack of development. It is kind of a win now, be the best now. You have to be the best player. And I give it, parent, doesn't matter how many examples I give them. I literally just sat around the cage with Mike Trout the other day. We were playing the Angels, and he's sitting, Dino Evils' kids were there, and, his sons are, one of his sons is going to be drafted in the first round for sure at this draft. Brady. And, they're talking with Mike, and, he's telling the story of his journey and how, scouts doubted him and said he wasn't this or wasn't that. And it was like, the biggest thing that he understood was like, hey, I got to be a ball player. I'm not going to chase trying to hit homers. I'm just going to continue to improve. And he's relentlessly working hard. And look at him. I mean, he became arguably, when he was playing, he was the best player in the game. There was no doubt about it, where he was the best player in the game. And, now you see he's like kind of towards the back end of his career, but like his example and his words of wisdom are like evident. Like, you don't have to be the best player all the time. And these parents, a lot of times it's the parents, it's the youth coaches, it's these kids that just get like completely obsessed with this. Then they can't undo that because they feel all the pressure from all over the place.
Yeah. So, hey, listen, we're going to get into my mind a little bit. This is a dangerous adventure we're on here right now, right? So here's a question for you though, Woody. And I think about you often when I think about this stuff, in terms of like protecting young players. Like you said, everybody's sort of following the lead of Major League Baseball and velocity rules, as we all know. Would it be possible for an organization to, again, maybe take a step back and go, okay, hey, look, why don't we draft pitchers that have never pitched like 93 plus? Or why don't we draft pitchers who maybe haven't thrown that hard yet, and we know we can get it? Because here's one thing I know this for a fact. If there's velocity in a player, we will get it through time and going through the process, right? Would an organization, through scouting and their player procurement, would they ever take that approach, or is that too crazy?
That might be a little, that might be crazy. No, I think we do that to a certain extent. I think, we recognize, okay, this guy's, and typically it's because the guy has a flawed delivery, or he's just not as strong, or, the ball doesn't come out of his hand, or, there's certain things that we know we can help him with, where we look at him and we go, okay, this guy's not topped out yet. Like, we know we can actually help him in different ways. The way he holds the ball, the way his arm kind of delivers. And so we know we can add a little bit of velo. And we have done that. I think the league in general has done that. And I think we do a really good job of that, I think, with the Dodgers. But therein lies the question: do you chase velo while stressing him enough to where it's like, okay, is it going to be a tipping point and he's going to break? Right. Is that worth it? And sometimes we have guys that are pretty good, but we know that they probably won't pitch in the big leagues or won't be big league caliber unless they actually add some velo to their arsenal, and that's the risk.
Yeah, no, and I get it, man. And it's interesting because in that report that Major League Baseball put out, it actually showed the decrease in it. Look, the injury rates in the game, they're literally changing how teams recruit or sign or draft players, right? They showed actually the numbers of high school players being drafted now in the first 3 rounds. It's almost non-existent anymore. It's dropped off like I can't remember the number, but significantly, right? And in the first 3 rounds, you're probably not going to get signed if you're a high school pitcher. College players a little bit more, which kind of makes sense with the contraction of the minor leagues, maybe, right? So the landscape's changing a bit. But if a team had the fortitude to go, hey, look, what if we looked for players who haven't thrown hard for long periods of time? They're probably going to be healthier. Because here was an interesting conversation I had about a year ago with a Major League Baseball medical coordinator. He said, hey, look, the quality of the tissue of the players, like we do MRIs, we do imaging, we do everything. These guys look great, but the quality of the tissues just aren't where they used to be in the game. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. And that's obviously pretty scientific. And those are the questions I ask. And I've gotten different answers. I've gotten both sides of the spectrum saying, okay, guy that has more bullets left, less mileage on his arm, like you said, could maybe last longer before he ends up, blowing out or whatever.
Yep.
So that tissue's, it's fresh. It's like he didn't start pitching until he was a junior. He has a great arm, but he didn't start pitching or whatever. So it's like the maximum velocity bullets that he's using aren't really there. And then you got the flip side of that, where some of our guys who I've talked to, and it's a little bit extreme, where they I think they used a javelin, one of the best javelin throwers in the world, trained in a way that was like completely abnormal. He didn't throw javelins all the time. He threw spears, and he threw lighter objects, he threw heavier objects, he threw all kinds of different things to build up. And they said when they looked at his tissue, it was like so strong and so dense that this guy was like a robot arm. And there's nothing, this guy was the best in the world. And, he didn't necessarily always train with the javelin he's throwing. So it's like you look at the heavy balls and some of the plyo balls that we use. And that's a lot of the factors that, listen, if you don't do that plyo ball routine properly, you will hurt your arm.
Yeah.
Right? It will hurt.
Right.
And that's where like youth kids are not getting instructed properly. They're just saying, hey, just throw this against the wall as hard as you can. Yes, you do need to throw this at max velocity, but you have to have proper technique in doing it. Otherwise, you will mess some things up. And that's where like a good idea and a great, resource is turned into a bad one because of the misuse and the lack of understanding and education on how to use those things. So, I mean, listen, there's both sides of it, where it's like, hey, I think pitchers need to be more athletic. I think they're just, they're so, we have our guys throwing like, backhands and jump throws and all these different things to build some tissue to be able to handle, okay, if their foot lands a millimeter off or an inch off, is that going to be too much stress for their elbow? Because they're so conditioned to throw a certain way, and it's the same delivery, it's the same, and all of a sudden they misstep once, or they get a little bit out of sequence, and then now the stress is too much for their elbow and it pops. That's typically how guys get hurt, the shoulder, or it's just overuse where it's just constant wear and tear, where it's just constantly fraying the tissues. And it's like, okay, eventually it's going to blow. But sometimes it's just one pitch where it gets out of whack and then bam, done. Shoulder, elbow. And then it starts this process of like, they can't undo it. So it's, I see some of our guys and, I don't know if there's a perfect answer to any of it. No. I think it is an individual basis. I think certain guys can handle more. I sometimes think that we don't push guys hard enough in the minor leagues. I think we do. They're like bubble wrapped, and we're not allowed to do anything other. Hey man, this guy's in the 5th inning and he's at 72 pitches. Get him out. It's like, okay, you're not building any endurance, and then you get to the big leagues and now you're asked to throw 85 pitches. You're asked to throw 90 pitches because we can't kill our bullpen in the big leagues. So I see that a lot in organizations where guys are being, just handled so cautiously through their system. And then they're like, we don't care if he blows out in the big leagues. That's fine. No, that's not good. Like, obviously, that's where most guys get hurt.
Not at all.
Just because there's so much stress involved in a major league game, and it's their first time sometimes, and they're young, and that's where a lot of guys blow up.
Well, listen, hey, and we've talked to players who finally make it to the big leagues, right? And, it's their dream and they never thought they'd get there. But when they get there, they're going, it's nothing like I could have ever imagined. It's so fast. Everybody's so good. And, I've talked to players who have said, hey, AAA is great, but the big leagues, it's a whole other world, right? Hey, man, listen, when you came back into the Dodgers, you had one of the coolest positions I think I've ever heard of before. You got to work the entire breadth of the organization. That must have been a real treat, Woody. And that probably, from a perspective standpoint, was pretty special, I imagine. Hey?
No, it was awesome. And I think just having the 4 years of managerial experience was changed things too, obviously. Because if I would have just been, going from what I was doing with the Dodgers before as a third base coach, infield, base running, to just being put in that role, I wouldn't have the perspective that I had from 4 years of managing, where I was literally involved in every decision from top to bottom, and had to build an entire organization. So there was like departments that we didn't even have in tech. So it was like we had to make this entire organization. I'm really proud of like what we were able to accomplish in a short amount of time. And then I come back to the Dodgers. So now I'm very educated and understanding and have a way different perspective, seeing all these things in play from the sports science department, how they talk to the coaches, how that ends up getting funneled down to the players, what kind of language we use, what kind of resources we have, and how do we get those to certain guys, and what's our leadership model, and how's the, like you said, the hierarchy, and who's in charge, and all these things. And so it was really cool to kind of come back and like look around and say, okay, there's certain things that I have a skill set in that I'm going to obviously put my hands on, and then the rest of it I'm just going to look at it and say, okay, are we doing this efficiently? Are we doing this? Do I have anything to add? When it comes to how do these processes work? How does this process work? How are these players responding? And you just see how the whole engine works, from outside of it, and including the front office, how we go, the scouting and the draft, and player acquisitions and trade, acquisitions and all these things. So it's like, how do we construct this thing? It was a really cool, obviously, experience. And, obviously Andrew and I are pretty tight, at the, he's at the top, obviously, and he does a phenomenal job. Him and Brandon Gomes do a phenomenal job in leading this organization. And obviously Dave Roberts does a great job as the manager. So it's just the leadership, and, is everything that I believe in, and the way everything is structured, allows people to really flourish and learn and grow and develop, from a staff, from players. And there's a standard. There's a standard when you get to our organization. Players know they're going to get better, and staff knows they have to get them better. So it's, and it's very positive. There's obviously a lot of good things happening. And like I said, there's an expectation, obviously, to win every year as well.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, we're talking with Chris Woodward, first base coach for the Dodgers, former Major League player, former Blue Jay with me, and of course, former manager for the Texas Rangers. Hey, Woody, your career path has been so special, man. You just mentioned, how, going from a player into the coaching world, into the manager, back to the coaching world, organizational side, man, the perspective you have. It's a great segue into some of the main questions I wanted to get to today, Woody, having you on the show. And the first one is, I want this, just to give you a preface, I want this to lead into the analytics of the game. I want to see where you think the value is there, because there's lots going on there. But before we get to that, Woody, some of the things you just said really got me thinking about, boy, if there was a message to send to young players and families and even coaches of young players who have dreams. Hey, listen, when you're there, and this could be you don't have to talk for baseball, but I'd really like to get to see what you think as a player. Like, what are you looking for, man? Like, what do you value? Or maybe a better question is this, Woody. What do you think is important for players to be thinking about as they chase down the dream? That's the frame. That's the way we want to frame it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great conversation. And I think you said the key word there is to think. What are players thinking? Are they thinking? I think that the biggest thing I look at in the game today is, this is no fault on any front office or any analytic group or anything like that. This is not them trying to control the game. Like, they've tried, they look at this game as like, there's chess pieces. Obviously, these players are on the field, and they've done everything they can to try to gain every advantage possible. In doing that, we've allowed, for some reason, like, the players to not have to think as much. And I think that, like, I was raised in an environment, man, you got to be a smart player. You got to think out there. You got to think before the play happens. You got to, we're talking about old school baseball a little bit, where it's like, hey, yes, you put me here. The positioning put me here. But what do I do after that? Is the ball going to be hit right to me? Absolutely not. It's baseball. Like, there's no way the ball's going to be hit right to me. I have to move right, left. I have to go behind. I have to know where I am on cutoffs and relays. I got to be in position. Baseball still needs to be played. And as much as people look at the game and they say, oh, it's just strikeouts and walks and home runs, that's not true. Like, I know that's being, because the pitching is so good, hitters are catching up. We train our butts off in the cage, man. These guys are working tirelessly. The high fastball with Vert, isn't as hard as it used to be to hit, because guys train the crap out of it, and they're able to get on top of some of these balls. So it's like, now, the strike zone is as small as it's ever been. I wish I had the strike zone, to be honest with you. Now, the stuff is way better than I faced. Obviously, this is Pedro Martinez every night.
Right.
But it's a small strike zone. I don't have
Mercy.
to swing it 6 inches off the plate. It's, this far off the plate is a ball. So I just look at the way this game is played, and I look for, this is one thing I stress heavily in Texas, and I know we stress this heavily here. We want hungry players. We want players that want to get better, that are obsessed with improving. And we have every resource imaginable to improve them. And so I look at that as like, man, this is like when we get the right players, when they show up, and we were talking about Mookie Betts and we were talking about Mike Trout and we're talking about some of these guys, it's obvious. You know that I know this about you the second I met you, Crush, because you have the same, light in your eye. You have the same like just spark of like, I want to learn. I can't wait to come to the field the next day. I can't wait to talk to this guy because he's going to help me. And when you actually can provide real answers in every single aspect, you talk about a position player, their swing, right? And we talk about, oh, there's too much swing mechanics, whatever. Dude, the way their body moves, we can analyze and break that down with all kinds of data, all kinds of technology, and with our eyes. Our
Sure.
eyes tell us the same, some of these things as well. So we have, motion capture stuff. We have ground force data. We have all these things that we can look at. And then we have the video of the swing itself. And we can watch them with our eyes. And we can use the game to kind of teach us to say, hey, this guy can't stay through a breaking ball. Where's the breakdown? We break down his biomechanics, and we have biomechanists working with our hitting coaches, working with our sports science people. And all of a sudden we have their weight room routine completely designed around an idea of to create a little bit more hip mobility, a little bit more downhill, not uphill. Like, I mean, it's the answers are endless. And so you look at infield, like I can get a guy with our sports science people. Hey, we got to get him to be able to get down into his hips a little low, a little bit more. We need some mobility there. He's getting sideways and he needs to be this way. The only way he can do that is by staying in his legs. We got to, and there's answers. There's real answers. Long tossing, like we got plyo balls. We got things to increase arm strength, increase your, we can show sequences, with all of our motion capture stuff. Like it's fascinating. And I think that when we get players that are fascinated by it, now it's like, okay, we're going to teach you all these things. And then between the lines, that's your job to go out and compete and be a champion and try to win every single pitch. Like there is a mentality to that. That's like, okay, all the science in the world can't make you a champion. Your heart makes you a champion. And that's what, like, when you combine all of it, man, it's special. And then you get a guy like, like I said, you get a guy like Mookie Betts who has the heart of a lion. You got Freddie Freeman on our team who's got the heart of a lion. Like this guy was like, had a cracked rib, broken ankle, refused to come out of the lineup and ends up being MVP of the World Series. Like, what I mean? And I watched it all unfold and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Like what these guys and how hungry and how much these guys care and how much work they put in on a daily basis. It is really special, but they use the help. They use the resources, and we have more answers than honestly than I've ever seen in this game. And that's what gets me excited when we have players that love to be coached, that want to be coached.
Hey, and Woody, that's exactly it, man. And I think that's a strong message to players who have a dream or just love the game and want to go. I always say this now because I've actually had a chance to I love the time with you guys, working with the pro guys every day, trying to tap into that extra little something somewhere. And sometimes there was a long-term plan. Sometimes we were attacking things right away. But now that I've had a chance to step away from that daily stuff and work with agencies and try to plan out careers for players and the process, and now that I'm helping Baseball Canada and working globally with Major League Baseball, my perspective has changed as well. I'm really, really excited about the developmental game right now. But first off, we have to make massive changes at the youth levels. The pressures there are just unrealistic and crazy, and we're breaking kids. And I often say we're probably destroying more talent there than we're creating with good intentions, right? And that's why these conversations are so great. You don't have to be perfect, Woody, right? I mean, I think there's so much pressure on players to be perfect right now to get a shot or to get looked at. Sometimes there's these other attributes like you're talking about, the willingness to change or just showing progress over time, right? That's got to be valuable for you guys when you're looking at players.
No doubt. And I'm not going to say any names, but like I look at the youth game and I watch it and I see coaches calling every pitch, catchers never getting an opportunity to put his, butt on the line and actually have to have some accountability to, hey, should I put a 2 down or a 1 down? Like, I don't know. I'm going to look over at my coach because he's afraid to lose this game. Coach, I've talked to youth coaches like, yeah, I'm not letting John over here call his own game ever again. He gave up a homer on a stupid pitch. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to take that from him now because he gave up a homer? He's 12. He's 13. Like, learn from that. That's the best opportunity for you to teach him. Yeah, so what? You lost a plastic ring, man. That sucks. Like, it really sucks. I know. And it's like going to kill your reputation that you lost that game. That's where we need to change. Like, youth coaches need to understand their job isn't to win tournaments. Their job is to develop players, to develop boys that can become men. Like, that is their number one job in life. Like, it doesn't matter how many plastic rings they get. And in the process, I promise you, you'll win a few rings. I promise you, you will. But if you can look at a kid, if you've had him for 2-3 years and you see he's better, well equipped to handle life after you've had him, good for you. Now, if this kid won 800 rings, but yet he's scared to death to go on the field to fail, you failed. You failed him. You failed the system. And this is where the problem is. This is where I get so passionate about it, because these guys are like, oh, you don't want to win. Absolutely, I want to win. If I play you in ping pong, I'm going to whip your butt. Like, there's no chance you're going to beat me.
I played you in ping pong, man.
I'm going to double down. I'm like, hey, let's play again. Like, of course, like, we're all competitive. There's nobody more competitive than me. Like, I guarantee you, I want to rip your heart out when I'm playing you. But after the fact, I'm going to be respectful and be like, hey, you want to do that again? That was pretty cool. Especially when you get two lines going head to head, man, that's what it's all about. And if you teach them to be that way and teach them to understand the game and say, hey, when you're out on the field at practice, what do you talk about? I used to have parents all the time get mad. Why do we spend so much time in base running? They need to hit. They need to pit. They need to do all these things that they think like they don't spend enough time hitting. You know what? I know you pay a guy $100 an hour to go hit. Do it then. Like, we'll spend time hitting, but we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the game, talking about getting primary leads, secondary leads, what to key off of a pitcher, how to determine whether to go first to third, how to score on a ball in the gap, like how to take tight turns around the bases, like where to be on cutoffs and relays, how do you double cut, like all these things. Like, these kids aren't learning. They're not, and they're being told their base coach say, you're not allowed to run unless I tell you. There's no feel for the game, and we get these kids. We had a kid who was a really high draft pick that, we weren't going to draft him, but it was close, that he went really, really high in the draft. I'm not going to say who it was, that had never called his own game in high school or college. He had never called a pitch. So we talked about, hey, what do you think about game calling? Because game calling is massive in the major leagues. Like, I find this fascinating that at the youth level, a catcher, if you're like 8 now, and you're playing on these high intensity, tournament games from 8 to all the way to high school, through high school, you never call a pitch because the coach calls every pitch. Now, when you get to the big leagues, you're calling every pitch for $1 billion industry. Like, how does that make sense? Like, we don't tell our guys. We talk about it beforehand. They have to study. They have to do all these things. So they learn that they can feel the game, and they know what your weaknesses are when you step up to the box. They know what the pitcher's strength is. They know exactly what they probably should call. So they've studied this, night after night after night, day after day. And so that, hey, we're going to give you the reins to the castle. We're going to give you the keys, and you're going to put the right finger down or push the right button. Dude, now at 14, you're not allowed to call a pitch. This kid was a draft pick, never called a game, never had the accountability to actually put a finger down and say, I believe in this pitch.
It's one of my biggest pet peeves in the game, Woody, is the coach calling every pitch in the game. I get maybe once in a while, but then come in and talk about why that pitch, right? I mean, there's such great opportunity there.
Yes, and that's where development, that's where learning, that's where, like, guys, when they get between the lines, and I've talked to, my son plays for a phenomenal coach now. And he's been coaching for the last couple of years. And, when I first mentioned this to him, he was like, well, like, I'm not going to call any pitches. I said, no chance, dude. Not as long as I'm around. Like, once I explained it to him, he's like, okay, that makes sense.
Sure.
We never put a steal sign on. We're like, hey, you guys got to watch this guy. You only get the chance to steal. Now, if you steal and you get thrown out and you come back to me and say, hey, I said, what do you got on him? Right? Or if you steal, and even if you make it, what did you get? What did you see? Now, we can talk about it at first base, or we can talk about it in the dugout when I get back over there. Say, hey, I think I see this on this guy. Yeah, there it is. Go for it. You got it. Take it. Now they're watching the game. Now they're not sitting on the bench just, talking about Minecraft or something. They're actually watching the game. They're actually watching, hey, the shortstop's giving away the pitches. He's moving a little bit on breaking balls. Or, shoot, that shortstop's getting great jumps out there because he's reading the swing. He's reading the pitch. Like, I tell our infielders, like, you can't miss a pitch at youth ball. Like, if a sign is given, you can't miss it. Pay attention. Yeah. So it's like these kids, a lot of these kids that have never even heard this stuff before, and we get them into pro ball. And they're like, I've never looked at a pitch before. I've never looked at the sign. I'm like, what? I did that in high school. Like, how is this? So like I said, I don't get frustrated by it. Globally, I get frustrated, but organizationally, I look at it great. That's great for us because every 29 other teams, if they're not focusing on the game like we are, because we got all the resources. Dodgers have more resources than any team in baseball, all the big resources. But the minor details are the most important for us winning a championship. And I'm not going to, it won us the championship last year. We did a lot of little things really well. Got in throwing lanes, got in here, got great jumps at first base, hit the right cutoff. We did a lot of little things well, and we won a World Series. Obviously, we have great players. But when it comes down to two teams, two Titans that are really good, the team that does the little things right is going to go home with the trophy. And that's what happened last year.
Yeah, no, and it was fun to watch. That was one of the best World Series I think I've seen. I think we were talking about this, Woody, and I think the only other real like incredible baseball I've seen in recent history was Japan US at the World Baseball Classic. That final, oh, that was talk about two Titans going head to head. That was epic. But last year's World Series was great. Hey, what about this? What do you think about this? So one of the things that I've sort of wound up saying, I don't think it was intentional, it just came about, was when I'm talking to even college level players or even, minor league pro players, I said, look, we don't know. Is this fair to say, Woody? Let me know if you like this. I would say, hey, look, we don't know how good you can be. We don't know how good you can be, but let's go through the process to find out. Like there's a process, man. And that process can be a little different depending on the surroundings. Like, a kid from Uganda is going to go through a little different process than a guy coming out of, Connecticut or Texas, right? But going through that process of development, that's how we're going to find out how good a player can be, and removing some of the bumps and the roadblocks and the challenges in the game by calling every pitch or um, um, just making it easy for the doesn't help that process really sink in, right?
No, for sure. And I think that's the fascinating part. That's why I got into coaching. That for exactly what you just said is because like you never know. There's too many players, and I'm no disrespect to these players, but like there's too many players that I've played with a legitimate lack of talent that were borderline superstars.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you look at just the overall physical talent was not special. I mean, I could name 15 guys off the top of my head right now that have made close to $100 million that weren't that talented, and for me, honestly, like I felt like I was pretty talented. But looking back and saying, okay, all the guys that I played with coming up, there was guys more talented than me. I thought far more talented, but the one thing that like still stands out to this day, like I was talking about earlier, is like, what kind of players are you looking for? It's
Sure.
like you look for players that are hungry to do exactly what you just said, to just get to be as good as they possibly can be. And if they have those intangibles, they're going to, in today's game. I think back in the day, it was a little more like, hey, let's throw something against the wall and see what sticks.
Sure.
When it comes to hitting, when it comes to certain things, when it comes to an approach, now it's like we have real answers. Like we have real answers that actually like legitimately help guys. And when we get those and we put it into, we put these answers into a kid who really wants it, he's going to achieve it. Like, I mean, it's a little bit more solidified now than I think it ever has been. On the pitching side, there's less variables, obviously. So you see these guys, and it's like, okay, we get this guy to throw a little bit to get to spin efficiency a little bit better, to tighten up that slider. You just a slight adjustment with his wrist, slight adjustment with his grip, and all of a sudden he's throwing the sweeper that's moving 24 inches, and the sinker, the four seamers riding at 23 inches bird, like all these things, and it's like now all of a sudden you have this like arsenal. It's like throw it there, nobody's going to hit it. Now on the hitting side, it's obviously a lot more difficult. It's obviously really hard to hit, but we still have like far more answers than we've ever had. So when you get a guy that's like, I just want to be great, and they have confidence to just keep working every day, and they're relentless, they're obsessed with it. They go home thinking about it. They wake up the next day and like can't wait to get to the field to talk to you about it. Those guys make it. Those guys make it, and they make it a long time. The guys that don't do that, which I don't understand, it makes no sense to my brain at today's game with so much money to be made, if you know what I mean, like that these guys just don't want to invest for whatever reason. And it's tough at times. This game will kick your butt. Like, it's hard. But the resiliency to just keep showing up every day and keep trying to get better, like, those guys make it.
Yeah. Hey, Woody, that brings me to, I think, one of my core conversations I really wanted to have with you today, with all your experience in the games now and with how the game has changed really, really quick. I mean, historically, in the blink of an eye, a lot of it has to do with tech and science and analytics. Analytics have changed the game. I think we can all agree on that. So I kind of wanted to get into the conversation with you today, and is where's the balance now? I think, and let me know if you disagree with me here, but this is just my perception of when all these analytics came in from the Moneyball era to where we're at now and all the science that's available now. I personally love it. But I think, would it be fair to say that when all this stuff came in, everybody was all hot and heavy for it? We redlined on this stuff. We went way over here. I think now the way I see it, and again, I could be wrong, but the way I see it is we're kind of coming back here where things are getting really meaningful again, and it's starting to get super fun. So I guess maybe my question is, one, do you kind of agree with that mindset? And then the second part of it would be is, where's the balance there, Woody? Because we see now like high school organizations and even some youth organizations with Rapsodo machines and TrackMan machines, and after every swing, kids are looking at the iPad now. Maybe they're getting distracted from some of those, the art of the game. Maybe, is that fair?
That's totally fair. I think you hit it on the head when you said it redlined. We're in a copycat league, obviously, just like every other league. Somebody does something well, it's like, you look at what the Astros did, and they're still good. Like, the Astros were like one of the first teams, and obviously the Dodgers were ahead of our times in so many ways. But I feel like the Astros are probably the team that kind of comes to mind where they just went like full go. You know, not to a detriment, because they went to what, how many, 7 straight ALCSs,
Yeah.
3 World Series or whatever it was. And I know they had the issue with the cheating stuff, but like they were good. Like they pushed the envelope in a lot of these, in technology and analytics and all these things. And and I think the league itself a lot of these teams tried to follow suit, because they were kind of the trailblazers of like, hey, we're just going to go this way, and with reckless abandon almost. And they were successful. So the teams were starting to follow. And listen, I've been in those meetings, when I was in Texas, and obviously here in LA, it's like, what makes sense to try? How far do you take things? How far is too far? And I think that, like, I love it all. I do. And you and I talk for all the time. When I was a player, you were the one that I went to for answers, because you had answers for me. Like, you always had like physical answers for me. Like, hey, do this. You're going to feel better. You're going to feel more powerful. You're going to feel whatever. And now I think, like, you look at analytics, there's so many ways to analyze a player, but I do think sometimes it misses the intangibles that, like I said earlier, actually help you win games. And we talk about when the margins are small, when the margins are really small, and you got a game where all things being equal, the team that typically like does all those little details, those little things, like takes a better turnaround first, or gets a better read on a ball in the gap, or on a base hit on a pump back line drive, like the hitter does a better job of staying inside the ball. It doesn't pull off. And then the base runner gets a great read on a ball that's like in between the second baseman and right fielder, because they have like instincts and they've been taught those things. He ends up scoring that go ahead run. Whereas another team, the hitter rolls over so that play never happens. But let's say the hitter does happen to hit a jam shot. The player just is frozen in time. The ball lands in between them and he barely gets to third base. So those things happen nightly. I mean, I have we have our own like Slack channel that I post a bunch of videos and plays and throughout the organization to say, do you see this base thing? Do you see this? Do you see this? Do you see this? And it's like just constantly pointing out like plays and things that happen in games that were good or bad. And that's where we show it to our staffs, and we show it to our players, and we show it to the big league guys. And I do that on our major league staff. And so it's like, when you get people that are obsessed with those things, then yeah, the analytics are really, really, really important. And I've said this before when I was a manager. I think the worst manager now would have probably been a better decision maker than the best manager 30 years ago. And that's no fault of a manager 30 years ago, because there were some great managers back in the day, but
Yeah.
they just didn't have the information that we have. You know what I mean? And people say,
Sure.
well, you got to use your gut. You got to use your gut all the time. Like most of the time when I tried to use my gut, it matched the numbers. There was only a few occasions where it was like completely opposite. And I'm like, whoa, okay. This guy's a terrible matchup, but he's pitching really well. This guy's a great matchup, but he didn't even get out of bed this morning. He was scared to death. Like, I can't put this guy in the game. Like, I have to go with this guy. Now, typically, those things don't happen like that drastically. But you get some managers that like have a really good feel, and I think Dave Roberts has gotten really, really good at that. Like where
Sure.
yeah, I mean, we have tons of answers. I wanted answers as a manager. Like, why would you not want answers? Why would you not want to get closer to finding a solution to the puzzle? And it's not like that's just, it's always like, they always talk about being scripted and all these things. Well, yeah, you're trying to like plan the game out. So if this happens or this happens or this happens, it's all contingency plans. Yeah, you'd love for your starter to go 7 scoreless with no hits, and then you bring in your 8th and 9th inning guy and the game's over. Boom, boom, done. Okay, but that doesn't happen. That's not baseball. That's not how the game works. So it's like you do have to have some feel for like, okay, when do I pull this guy? What am I seeing with my eyes? And then obviously you can back that sometimes with some data in between innings that says, hey, his velo's dropping, his spin is dropping, his this is dropping. And we all have those red flags to say, hey, he's probably like fatigued. You talk to him and you see it, you feel it, and you're like, okay, probably time to get him out of there, even though he's gone 6 scoreless. Meanwhile, though, people are gonna be like, "What are you doing? Why are you taking this guy?" We're
Yeah.
time bomb. Like this is going to end bad if we keep him in there. And it's not always the case, but like this is where like there's a blend of the good teams do it well, and then when it comes to data and technology and all these things, like getting players to obsess over the right things. They value first base. Man, if they value just getting to first base, they will work on their swing right. They will take the balls. They won't get obsessed with like, how hard am I hitting the ball? Like they value the fact that, okay, with 2 strikes, I have to give in a little bit. So if I get jammed and get beat a little bit, I can stay on the breaking ball enough to not only hit it, but to take it. You look at Mookie Betts, you look at Freddie Freeman, you look at their BP. If you watch Freddie take BP, you'd be like, wow, this guy's one of the greatest hitters of all time. I mean, his dad taught him from an early age never to pull a ball. Every ball he hits is to left center, shortstop, left center, line drive, and that's what he wants to do. And then he hits homers to right in the game. Like there's a process to the way he goes about it, and it's like all these guys get obsessed with, some of the wrong things, and it's like, yeah, and pitchers get obsessed with the velo or they get obsessed with the spin. Like, did you execute the pitch? That was a great spin rate and it was a great movement on your pitch, but it ended up in the other dugout, in the other batter's box.
Yeah.
That doesn't, like, you didn't execute it. So where is the balance of like great stuff, good execution, good stuff? You're going to be pretty successful. But some of these guys, they're all over the place. They're just like great stuff, bad execution, walk, homer. Like, okay, this guy's out of the game.
What a great perspective, man, Woody. I had to write it down here. Just rather than launch angles and exit velocities and bat speeds, value first base. How do you value first base, man? And what's going to get you there, right? That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
What a great freaking mindset for the game of baseball, man. I haven't heard that before.
Ball players, man.
I love it, man.
Yeah, those are the best hitters I've ever been around. They were ball players. They valued first base. Now you hit a homer, you touch first base, right? You
Sure.
walk, you hit first base. You get a base hit, you hit first base. You reach on an error, you hit a rocket to the shortstop, he boots it. Like, now you're a base runner, you're on first base. Like, and you value that. And you value that over time. Like, this is helping my team. Like, if I'm chasing numbers and those numbers happen. They happen through discipline and they happen through good approaches and they happen through, good execution. Like, they don't just magically happen. You can't force these things. Do you want a guy who goes up there and hits 40 homers, trying to hit a homer every time? He hits 40, but he has a 650 OPS. Or do you want a guy that like values first base as much as he values the homer? And he says, you know what? I'm not budging. I'm going to be super disciplined and I'm going to take my walk. I'm going to go to first base when you throw me. When the umpire says, hey, you got to go to first, I go to first. Like, at some point you're going to have to throw me strikes, or else the guy behind me is just going to kill you. Like, you know what I mean? And this is where like you talked about it earlier. So it's a one-on-one at bat with a 9-on-1 approach.
Right.
It's not one-on-one. It's 9-on-1. All 9 guys have to buy in. Otherwise, you have cracks in the system. You have cracks, there's flaws. And when you have one guy, man, sometimes it kills your whole momentum. And it's not about getting a hit every time. And it's, the same thing on the pitching side. If you get a guy that comes in your game and walks a leadoff guy, or doesn't attack the strike zone, or gets outside of who he is and tries to overthrow, and now all of a sudden you're allowing that other team to have some momentum. So it's like, I don't know, the best players in this game now, they're very, very disciplined, and they're very good at what they do, and they obviously go out there and they're able to execute it.
Woody, trainable skill, right? That's as trainable as anything I would ever help you do. It's a skill that has to be trained over time, right? I would say probably the earlier the players, coaches, parents start thinking about this, the better.
Yeah, and it's funny to watch our parents sometimes, and over the years, watch me train our boys, and I'll throw to them, or we'll do routines where, hey, I'm going to throw you 2 strikes out of these. I don't know when they're going to be. But if you can, I put 2 balls on the plate. You put them wherever you want. If I throw them over those balls, you swing. If I don't swing, even if it's a strike. And they're just like frustrated. They're like, are we going to take any swings? And I'll just throw ball, and just watch their mouths just like drop. And they're like, I want to hit. But you're suppressing that. Yeah, I want you to hit too. But guess what? If you swing at that one off the plate, first of all, you're out. Second, you're behind in the count. So now you're never going to get the one that you actually want, because you're not learning any discipline. So it's like, some of these kids, they just laugh. They're just like, what are we doing? Like, trust me, when you learn how to swing at strikes. Now listen, sometimes the used strike zones are a little bigger, so you got to kind of expand a little bit. But the way the game is now, man, if you have discipline, you can survive. You can survive at a high level.
Hey, listen, so Woody, I just decided. So just so people know, I was a strength coach with the Blue Jays back in the day, and I just loved the game. I loved working with you guys in all aspects, in all the players. And I would actually go and throw BP sometimes in the cage to you guys, and it was ugly. But I just decided
You'd be good at
I
it.
might have been the most valuable BP guy ever, man, because it was you guys had no idea what was coming. And I'm not gonna say I was terrible, but I wasn't like, man, I wasn't like, painting strikes after strike after strike, right? So
You're the guy that I would
I
want to
was
face now.
laughing, by the way.
No, but you would be the guy that I would want to face now, because you would teach me discipline. And I wouldn't get frustrated, because like I get mad at guys. Like even when I was managing, I would get mad. I'd watch them from behind the cage, even in flips, or if it's off a machine or whatever. And it's like the machine's throwing a few balls here and there. It's like, all right, like, oh, that ball cut or that ball sank. It's like, okay, you don't think that pitcher's going to throw some balls that move? Like, oh, but I want to feel good. Like if you don't challenge, like the one thing we've done better now in the industry now is we train better. So we train mixed BP. We actually, BP guys throw sliders. They throw breaking balls. I remember I got like, when I was my first year coaching in Seattle, I was on the minor league side. I was an infield coordinator, and I was throwing BP, but our hitting coordinator asked, he said, hey, we're going to have, base hit or bunt, hit and runs, whatever round. And then the second round, we're going to do this. Third round, we're going to do 2 strikes. So here I am, the rookie coach who's never coached a day in his life. It was like our first full, like it was instructional. Like I literally just got done playing, and now I'm in instructional league in a organizational meeting. And so they're like, 2 strike round, you get 5. I want them to choke up and then shoot the balls to the opposite field. So I was like, okay. And I raised my hand, the jerk I am. I raised my hand. I was like, hey, if I'm throwing BP, can I throw a slider? And they're like, what? It was like blasphemy. It was like, what?
Right?
Throw a slider? Like what? No. You're gonna get somebody hurt. I'm like, I'm gonna get somebody hurt? Like the pitchers throw sliders. Like we're okay with them getting hurt in a game, but like, oh, but they might hurt themselves. I'm like, how about they just, if you truly want, I said, I'm just telling you, we did all this crap before when I was a player, and it made no sense to me to do a 2 strike round and not throw different pitches.
Right.
Because I can easily just slap a ball to right field in BP. Like you're throwing it the same speed. 2 strikes. Like if we're gonna make it 2 strikes, and so it didn't go over well. But I think I gained a lot of respect from people for voicing my opinion as a first day coach. It was pretty funny. But I mean, at some point we did make the adjustment, because I would go to different, affiliates that year, and I would be like, hey, do you mind if I take 2 strike round? Like the hitting coach at the different affiliates was like, hey, I don't mind you throwing a slider if you can. We just know most coaches can't. So I was like, I
Right.
can. I can
Yeah.
throw a nasty one. I'm like, I can throw a good one.
Hey,
I'm like,
man.
and it did. The players responded to it. They were like, I actually like that a lot. That actually felt more
Makes so
like
much sense, Woody. It
it
makes
was
so
harder.
much sense to
It
me.
wasn't overpowering. I wasn't overpowering him. I wasn't throwing 100. I was just throwing easy BP with a little wrinkle slider. Like some guys, it's just like we've changed that obviously now. So it's like you said, watch Mookie Betts to hit before a game, and he wants mixed BP before the game,
Yeah.
and
Love
he's
it.
good at it. He rakes it. Like he spits on the sliders, he hits the hangers, and he hits the fastball to right center. So it's like he's training himself right before competition to give himself a chance, before the most important thing, which is the game.
Right. No, it makes so much sense. I love that. No, what a great conversation. Chris Woodward joins us. Hey, a couple more questions. I know it's getting late. I know this is a crazy time for you, so I want to keep you for another 4 hours, but I'm going to try to. Hey, so let's go here. Two questions. I'll try to stay to this, true man. Um, Getting back to the analytics and breaking all this down, pitcher, position player, hitter. We talk about all the data and everything that you guys now have, all the tools you mentioned, right? Still very individual though, right? I mean, I go back to the day. I think back to when I was working with you guys, and Woody, I, I just loved it, man. It was just such a treat. But I, every one of you guys was so different, and I was actually kind of proud in hindsight. And again, if I knew back then what I know now, I think it would have helped you guys a lot more. But I really did take a lot of pride in individualizing those programs. Your program was very different from Carlos Delgado or Mondesi or Alex Gonzalez, or you know what I mean. That's still true today when you guys are talking about all the analytics and data. Still, there's probably themes. It's baseball, but there's individual stuff too, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's core philosophies that, like, if you're a hitter in our organization, you have to be disciplined. You won't play for the Dodgers if you're not. Now, that being said, like our individual process of how we make you that way or how you can become that way. Like we have Teoscar Hernandez, who's, not Mookie Betts. Like they're
Right.
different. Now, obviously, our coaches have to treat them different. Teo's a little bit more of a free swinger where Mookie is more passive. And the Freddie's is, he swings a lot. So it's like all these guys are different, and their routines are different. They're the strength coaches, the trainers, the analytics people, the sports science. We all have individual plans for these guys. Defensively, I'm coaching infield. Like every one of our infielders is different. They all move different. They all have different things that they're good at. We all have different routines. So it's like, yes, there's like bumpers to keep them. Okay, these are things that we value, right? And we can't abandon these things that we value on the infield. You can't miss a pitch. We're locked in on every pitch. We're reading every swing. We know everything that's gonna, we're anticipating. Now, how Mookie does that as opposed to how, Max Muncy does that as opposed to how Kike does that, like they're all different. Like my message has to be slightly different for each of them because I know them all. And that's where like the relationships and, true leadership is obviously building a relationship and building trust. Like that's where it all comes down to. And it's like when they trust you, you can help them and they show that you care. This guy will do anything for you. Like honestly, and these players know that we have real answers for them and we care about them. And that's why they run through walls, honestly. But yes, everything is individualized. There's no cookie cutter approach to anything that we do. And sometimes that can be a little bit messy because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of shrapnel all over the place because,
Sure.
especially in the minor leagues. The minor leagues is like it's a yard sale of things, you know what I mean? Of just this guy's doing this guy's doing that, this guy's doing this. But you have to do it that way. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort from the staffs. But I wouldn't do it any other way. Like, why would you do it any other way? It's just lazy if you don't, honestly. And that's what I look at some staffs. So they're just like, oh, these dictators do it my way. This is how we do it here. And it's like, okay, but not everybody's the same. Like, you're gonna do this in a society. Like, we all have freedom to do what we want, and it's like we have freedom to move differently as well. Like, they're athletes. Why would we make everybody move the same? And I think that there's too many examples of where that failed in the past to where we go, we're never doing it that way because
Right.
that doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. No, fantastic. I love that, Woody. Okay, last one. One of the things that I've really enjoyed over the years, not just in baseball, but all sports, but certainly in baseball, is I like to watch trends in the game, right? So, like for example, you mentioned the Astros. Well, again, I might have the dates off. People have to double check this for me, but I believe the new ownership for the Astros was 2011 or something like that, right? And they came out big and bold and said, "Look, we are attacking the World Series." That was kind of their message. And so I'm going, whoo, okay, all right, new ownership. They got it. They're going for it. Let's see if they can do it. And oh my goodness, man, 2011, 2012, 2013, and here they come, right? So we watched the Orioles struggle and struggle and struggle, finally click and build, right? I was really fascinated by the Kansas City Royals 2013, 2014 when they made their run, the Blue Jays here, the Braves. But here's the thing. I was talking the other day. We were talking about this conversation with a couple of great friends of mine who are sports guys, huge baseball fans. And they just got me thinking. I'm going, could the Dodgers be the perfect franchise? Like, I mean, I just look at you guys and from the ownership and the attitude and the way you guys, especially last year, really got to see the way the details, the little things, man, the way you guys play the game in that World Series. But then also, I know some of the guys in the minor leagues and people who've gone through there, like yourself, the attention and the support from minor leagues, and then the emphasis on staff education. Like, I just, I'm just wondering, I know you're in it, so I'm not gonna, but I don't want to put you on the spot here, but could the Dodgers be like the perfect franchise? Ownership, leadership. You have then the on field, you have procurement, scouting, resources, the commitment to the whole picture, man. I don't think I've quite ever seen anything like it, Woody.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
I'm pretty biased. Very fair.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
Very, very.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Yeah,
No,
you can't say no, no, it's not, man. No, it's not.
no,
But there's so many good things going on there.
yes, and it's really, really difficult to create what we have. It's I know we've talked about this offline, but when you're in leadership and you're trying to create the perfect system, you're trying to create like every single department. There's so many pillars in your organization of like, okay, we have, front office, we have, scouting department, we have, the big leagues roster, the big league staff, player development, and then all of the other departments within those systems, on the pitching side, on the hitting side, on the defense, and then you have sports science, and you have all these things. Now, how do you become the best at all of them? And I look at the Dodgers, and that's why there was no other place that I was going to go, because I believe in what we do. I believe in, and it starts, honestly, for me, it starts with the culture. The culture is like the top, the number one, where Andrew Friedman, Brandon Gomes and Dave Roberts and all of our leadership people all have very, very similar styles, meaning they make everybody important in the organization. They value everybody, right? And they inspire everybody. Now they are hard to please because they want to be the best. They expect the best out of you, but they're never going to be, detrimental to you. They're never going to come down, overly hard. They expect you to be great. They expect you to want to be great. And so in doing that, they only hire people with that similar mentality. They don't hire people. They're really strict on who they hire. So if you get a job here, and I tell people this all the time when they come to the Dodgers, like you're not coming here. If you've been chosen to come here, it's for a reason. They saw something in you. They saw a spark in you. They saw something in you that tells you that you're going to achieve whatever you possibly can achieve, because they see that. They interview you. And so now you get a guy with like some expertise, and we have a lot of guys with a lot of expertise.
Yeah.
That, you once you're involved in this, and it's like, wow, this is a fun place to come to work every day. Now, fun meaning like it's exciting. It's not easy. It's not easy to be a Dodger staff member. It's not. You got to provide, like, you got to coach Mookie Betts. You got to coach Freddie Freeman. You got to coach these guys. That's, if you're in the organization, that's who you're coaching if you get to the top, right? And those guys demand a lot, which is fantastic. All the guys that I had before when I was with the Dodgers, the Corey Seagers, the Justin Turners, the Chase Utleys, those guys were hard to coach.
Sure.
They were demanding. But when they know that you care and that you put in the work and that you're relentlessly trying to help them, they do the same. And so now you look at, the front office and the decisions we make, the ownership. I mean, the ownership, I don't know any other team that's been willing to do what we've done. right? Honestly. So you do look at it and it's like it is a perfect storm in a lot of ways. Now listen, everybody's coming for our butts.
Yep.
Everybody's coming for us. But we got a huge target on our back, which is totally fine. That's what we want. That's what our players want. That's what our front office wants. That's what our ownership wants. We want to be the best. So we have to go earn it though. Nobody's going to give us the World Series. Just because we have a great roster doesn't mean we're going to earn it, or we're just going to hand us the trophy tomorrow. Like everybody wants to rip that out of our hands, right? And so that's where like all these details matter. So everything we can run up against a good pitcher in a game 6 of a World Series. Like, guess what? It's going to come down to whoever gets a clutch hit, or whoever has the great at bat, or has some, is able to steal a base, or whatever it comes down to. It's going to come down to something small that most teams like gloss over all year, and they don't really, we don't do that. And that's where I think, like, from a development standpoint, it's every day. These guys are excited every day. They can't wait to help our players. Our players come in excited every day. They can't wait to improve. And then you have this system of like, you see, they get to come to spring training and watch our big leaguers work. We had our entire team here. Our entire team was in Arizona, basically. Almost our entire roster, like 2 or 3 weeks before spring training started. I mean, we were out there getting after it. Like, we had our full infield, and we were doing an hour of ground balls, an hour of like live ground balls, like, and they were just like talking with one another. They were communicating with one another. I mean, it was, and then our outfielders are out there, doing some power. They were just getting after it, just talking baseball. They're just sitting in the locker room talking about how we're going to do this or how we're going to do that better. And that's the environment it's really hard to create that. And it takes like one piece at a time, but like every organization is trying to get there in sports. And we're in a good spot. Like I said, it doesn't guarantee anything, because we know it's going to be hard. Back-to-back World Series is really, really hard. But we're excited for the challenge. Like everybody in there's like, yeah, let's go. Like,
No, hey Woody,
gotta go, man. We gotta fix it. We gotta do it again.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, right on my cork board over here, I have a little sticky that I think you would appreciate here, because I think, would this sum up our conversation? It actually says, this is from the Harvard Business Review. I just saw it one day a couple years ago. It says, culture trumps strategy every time. Fair?
Unless they have a good, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's
Culture.
where like just
What
talent,
you're talking about here is a culture, man, of just,
with strategy.
yeah.
That's where I'm like, okay, because it's not like if you have culture without strategy and you have strategy without culture, that's a tough matchup. I don't know who
That's what that's saying, right?
Yeah, and
You
I don't
get
know who
those
has
things going
But like
together, man.
culture, a good culture always has a good strategy.
Yeah,
Otherwise it's not a good culture.
exactly.
We don't just blindly just love each other and like, hey, everything's cool. Like we had a great culture. It's fun to come every day. You get a bunch of great dudes that don't know how to play. Like, no, we have a great culture because like it's invigorating. It's like it's tough. Yes, it's very strategic. It's demanding. Those aren't like fun words. That's not a good time for some people. And those are the people we don't want. Some people like to be comfortable. We actually don't like that.
Yeah.
We don't love it. We don't like to be comfortable. We actually would prefer to be a little bit uncomfortable so we can get challenged. And like we accept challenges that come at us. Like, go for it. Challenge us. We have just countless players, staff that just love to be challenged. So it's like now you get in that environment. That's the culture I'm talking about. Not when you talk about culture, it's like, yeah, we're like lovey-dovey and everybody's love. Yeah, we do love each other. But we're also brothers. Brothers fight. Like we disagree. And when we disagree, it's respectful, but yet we come to a conclusion and we go, okay, you know what, Krush, you're right. You win that one. I agree with you, and we're going with that. And I'm fully supportive of that. There's no like ego in the way. Hey, somebody says something. I always do that. As a coach, like, hey, what do you got? Players come to me all the time. Hey, what do you think of this way? That's freaking awesome. We're going to do that instead.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I think you said it right.
But if I have ego, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Hey, just hold on one sec. I got to find this. So, I actually, you're making me think of this right now. It's here somewhere.
O-Dog's hat?
That's David Wells. David Wells, when he got when he had his back really injured, I helped him rehab his back. So he actually signed that for me. I think it's when he went to the All-Star game, that one.
Okay. Yeah, he won 20 games that year.
Oh, where is it? It's here. I know it is. Uh, um. Oh shoot, I can't see
It's
it.
chicken scratch wherever it is.
It's it's called it's called it's called Intangibles.
Oh, the book.
The book.
Yeah, I know what
And
you're talking about. Yeah,
hey, so anyway, it's there. I can't see it right now. But listen, hey, one of the things, and I noticed this, Woody. I noticed this watching the playoffs last year in the book with Joan. She was actually on the show talking about her research into that book, right? And it's about culture of, and it was really around
great
baseball.
book.
But
Yep.
there's one part in there. It's a fantastic book. But the one
Hmm.
part in there, she was looking at a study that actually was showing how like player interaction was so important. It really does reflect, what happens in that clubhouse. And one of the things I saw just in the dugout watching you guys play last year made me think of that chapter and that conversation with Joan. I saw your guys, like there was little shots in the dugout, man, with a player with his arm around another player. And there's they're not even in the play. There's nothing really going on, but he's got his arm around him. They're talking about something, or a pat on the shoulder, or the high fives and stuff. Just the contact, and that's kind of what this study said. The players who are comfortable with those types of contact, man, there's something special going on there. And I saw that with you guys last year, and I said it to a couple of my pals. I said, "Watch these guys, man." But I said, "Don't watch them on the field. If you get a chance just to watch the Dodger dugout, just keep your eyes on the dugout and see what happens." And I'm telling you, man, I just knew right there there's something special going on, man.
Right. No, that's hard to like. We have it's one of the better groups of players that I've ever been around. Like I said, these guys love to be coached. They love to play. They love to play with each other. They're out there. They're grinding with each other. They have each other's back. They know that there's one goal here, like it's to win a World Series. And last year our backs were against the wall.
Yeah.
Listen, when San Diego beat us 2 years ago, Arizona beat us the next year, and then we're right back in that same situation where we're down 2-1 to the Padres, which they had done before. And, for us to come out in San Diego, throw a shutout, Mookie gets us started with the homer, but everything after that game, you can sense something was different. And it was like a group of men came together and just an organization kind of came together, staff, everybody that was included in that. And obviously the players are the ones out there on the field doing it. But you could sense like after that game that something was way different. They had accomplished. I mean, we still haven't even won the series yet. It was still 2-2 going to game 5 in LA. And it was like, now we have Yamamoto, a rookie, who obviously was 3-time MVP in Japan, but he's still a rookie in the big leagues pitching for us against Darvish. Like, holy crap, Darvish has carved us up the whole time. So it was like, I mean, this is no cakewalk. We still have to do this again. Like, we just shut them out. Yeah, but like, we still have a tough test. And we knew that game was going to be the hardest game. Like, we knew that series was going to be the hardest series. Didn't mean we were going to win the next series hands down, but it just meant like that they were our toughest test. They were the best team in baseball, like leading up to that. And in a short series, you just never know. But those guys had to come do something together, with your back against the wall, and nobody backed down, nobody gave in. Everybody kind of looked each other in the eye and said, "Okay, here we go," and they got it done. And that's going to carry forward. Like that moment. I mean, Yamamoto pitching in game 5 and going 5 scoreless. That will set him off, potentially on a run, hopefully in the playoffs for years to come. That just he can't wait for that moment again. Whereas you see what happens on the other side of that, and I know what that feels like. We lost 2 World Series, and it's like it's tough. It's tough to come back in this game when you haven't won. So for us to overcome that, we hadn't won in a few years. Like it's not like we won it every year. So for us to do that, obviously sets us on a path of like, but we know it's not going to be easy. Our guys know that. Our players know that. Our staff knows that. And we have to grind just as hard every game, even if we're the most talented roster, doesn't matter. Like we still have to go out and prove it every day, knowing that when we get in October, somebody's going to try to rip it from us.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I love sport, Woody. I love sport, my man. Hey, listen, it is late. You got to get going. I could talk forever here. Fantastic conversation, Woody. Thanks so much coming back from Japan. Hey, the season is rolling here, and we appreciate your time and your insights. Such a great conversation, Woody.
No, I appreciate it, Krush. Always a pleasure, brother.
Okay, listen, there you go. What a great conversation. You know, I couldn't find that book. See, here it is. Intangibles. That's the book I was trying to find. I couldn't see it there. But with Joan Ryan, that's that book I was talking about with Woody. Man, some really good stuff in here. If you're a baseball fan, if you're a sporting fan, this is a must-read book. You can go back and listen to our interview with Joan Ryan. Just Google Krush Performance and Joan Ryan. A great discussion. But listen, I noticed that with the Dodgers in the playoffs last year, you know, watching them go through. But I always watch the dugout even while the game's going on. What are the players doing? And man, when you see those players hanging over, you know, the fence at the top of the dugout, and you see guys with their arms around each other, or they're talking, or they're really into the game, you know something special is going on there. That's a special environment for those players. When you see those players interacting like that, there's something going on in that culture, and it's invaluable. I can tell you that right now. I saw that with the Dodgers last year, and I even said it, I think, to my wife and a couple of my buddies when we were watching the game, my younger brother for sure. And sure enough, there they are, just battling through adversity and winning the World Series. What a great conversation. I don't even know where to start. I almost feel like we should just call it right now. Everybody take a breather. Let's go back and watch this again with our notebooks and our notes, and then come back and discuss it on next show. And we might do that because there is so much to talk about here. Chris Woodward has an incredible reference point right now in the game. First of all, as a player, you know, he wasn't a highly touted, highly drafted player. You can go back and look at where he was drafted. I don't think anybody ever expected him to have major success, but somebody saw something in Chris Woodward. And as he mentioned, you know, it probably wasn't so much his unbelievable skill set as it was his tenacity and his approach to the game. I love that there's an organization that probably values that as much as anything else that they can possibly tangibly measure or see in a player. I believe that's very, very important. I also think that's trainable through the youth development. Some of the things Chris said about, you know, us removing like the road bumps, the speed bumps on the pathway of development. Listen, I could tell you this, even from the research, but also from my experience. When you make it too easy for the players or for an athlete to progress and succeed in sport, when you make it too easy, you really do lower their ceiling of potential. And there's no exceptions there. All right. When a player doesn't deal with adversity or doesn't learn how to deal with adversity or learn from mistakes or have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes without having the pressure of failure, that player cannot be as good as they could be. And that's a human thing. That's, you know, that goes well beyond sport. So, you know, when we have, and we've talked about this before in the show, when we have coaches calling every pitch, I'm just telling you what, those catchers are going to, their potential as players is dropping like an elevator. Those pitchers, their potential as players dropping like they're never learning how to manage, call, or actually play the game. And I like that somebody like Woody is actually saying that. I mean, where he's been and where he's at right now in the game, those are very, very powerful words. Something for us to think about at the youth development. And I'm not saying you don't call a pitch now and then, but I would like to see a coach maybe, hey, call the catcher, call a curveball in this scenario, bring the pitcher and the catcher in after, hey, you guys know why I called that curveball right there? And then you have a discussion, a teachable moment right there, right? But I would rather much see those two players, the pitcher and the catcher, try to figure out the game and then discuss what went right, what went wrong after it was all over. I think that over the course of a player's development raises a ceiling of potential. And again, we just don't know how good a player can be until they go through a process. And either that process is good or it's not. There are massive, massive opportunities in the game of baseball, in sport right now, to really help your players succeed, because there's so many things that just aren't being done right. It's crazy. There's a lot of good things going on out there, don't get me wrong, but there's massive opportunities right now. And again, one of the big ones is using all this data and information we now have to steer and direct player development. Now, we don't have all these resources at the youth levels, but it doesn't change the fact that we need to prepare our players properly for the competitive scene of the game. In-game performance is what it's all about. And you know that old saying, Abraham Lincoln, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. I think if we got back to more of that mindset when it comes to sport and athlete development, especially in a game like baseball, baseball is unique for a couple of reasons. Again, it is a highly, highly skilled sport, and it is one-on-one. It's you and the baseball, but then it's also, as Woody said, I love this, he says it's 9-on-1. It's you against 9 players, and that's hard to escape sometimes, right? But it's a good perspective of the game of baseball. But that throwing motion, let me tell you, infield right now, and the way youth development has gone with year-round baseball, year-round training, the maximum load training year-round, even if it's not competitive, we're up against it. And it's one of the reasons the injury rates are so high. So listen, if you're a player, a parent, or a coach out there at the developmental levels, there are so many takeaways here. Number one, if you stay healthy, you have a good chance of doing something special in the game, because most players will not be healthy through their careers. I think it's probably one of the most valuable things a player can strive for right now. And that just comes along with understanding player management, load management, managing players in season and off season and over the course of the long term, right? And so that's one of the big things for sure. But also understanding the concept of developing the athlete for the sport and the sport demands, right? And we've got all these incredible tools like Woody said, Rapsodo, TrackMan. We've got data like we'd never had before. And we can use that. It actually can be quite valuable as a tool to help guide development in terms of where a player might be right now and where we hope they will go over the course of the future. And every player is going to take a little bit of a different path. But there are fundamentals of the game. And one of the things that I love that Woody said when he talks about their players and their organization is your approach to the game. You got to love the game. You got to want to learn. You got to be fearless, but also you got to be willing to fail and understand how to learn from that failure, right? Oh, such great stuff. So there we go. I think that'll pretty much wrap up, you guys, our baseball series. It's been fantastic. You know, we might do a little discussion here coming up talking about, you know, player development and from the agency side, how the road has changed. But that's not just baseball. That's all kinds of sports. Next day, I do want to get to some of my storylines. I'll try to see if I can't get some of the guys on to talk about the stories and the things we're going to watch this season, because that's always fun and it gives us something to look forward to over the course of the season. But also, it's a way to learn. You know, we always say if you want to figure out what to do, look to the pros. And sometimes you look to the pros to see what not to do, of course. But for the most part, there's good things going on up there. And they really do set the tone. And that brings us back to the conversation about velocity right off the start. That was one of the first things Woody and I talked about. Major League Baseball values velocity. And that has had a trickle-down effect that has been absolutely devastating for the health of players. And if you as a player, coach, or parent can start understanding the process, or at least managing your players properly as they grow and develop, that's pretty special. And again, that goes back to our beautiful collaboration that we just started with Baseball Canada and our Creating Coachable Player program. That's something we're very, very proud of. But this is what we're trying to attack, just educating everybody on what do you do? How do you go about doing it? Because, I mean, like what he said, there are so many different things you need to know, and nobody can possibly know them. But there are fundamental things that need to happen as a player grows and develops in the game that can really set them up for success and also help reduce their risk of injury. And that's what that program's all about. Very, very proud of that. And that just kicked off here this last week. So we'll talk more about that in episodes to come. So anyway, everybody, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I have to thank Woody for joining us because, man, what a busy time for them. Fascinating to hear about their trip to Japan and what an experience that was. Those guys are jet lagged. We'll be watching them early in the season here for sure. But if you have any questions, comments, smart remarks, if you have a topic you'd like us to investigate, let us know. We've dedicated segments, entire episodes to your ideas. info@jeffkrushell.com is the email. Follow me on social media. Search out Krush Performance or Jeff Krushell, and I'm there. And we'll talk to you next week right here on Krush Performance, everybody. Have a great one. We'll see you then.